The salvation doctrines of Christianity survived and flourished, because they afforded the priesthood considerable power. The priests alone held the keys to salvation and could threaten the unbelievers with eternal punishment. Hence, in the evolution of Christianity in the last 2,000 years with priests preying on human fears, the religion has demonstrated extraordinary powers of survival. Even without the priests, the various versions of the Bible have had more influence on the history of the world, in the minds of men than any other literature. Unfortunately, the beliefs in Scripture produced the most violent actions against man in the history of humanity up to that time. The burning of competing Christian cults, called heretics, by early Christian churches acted as the seeds of violent atrocities against man. There later followed the destruction of Rome by the Christian Goths, and the secret pagan sacrifices consented by the Pope, the Vandals that had the Bible with them, as they destroyed imperial North Africa, the Crusades in the 11th century fighting in the lands around the eastern Mediterranean, Palestine and Syria, capturing Jerusalem and setting kingdoms from Anatolia to the Egyptian border. In 1204 the Fourth Crusade plundered Constantinople, the most holy city at that time, with Christians fighting Christians. And the slaughters continued, and continues to this day. According to Romer, more heretics and scholars were burned in the Middle Ages than were ever killed in Carolingian times. For at this time the Inquisition came into its own, and torture, largely unused as an instrument of government since Roman days, was reintroduced. In the 1380s, John Wycliffe translated the first English Bible, which inspired an English religious revolution which caused persecutions against him by the Catholic Church. In the early 1500s the German heretic, Martin Luther, almost single-handedly caused the final split from the Roman Catholic Church and created the beginnings of the Protestant Revolution. This split still influences violence to this day. He translated the Bible into German, which further spread Protestantism. Luther also helped spread anti-Semitism with his preaching and books such as his The Jews and Their Lies, all supported through his interpretation of the Bible. One should not forget that Hitler, a Christian and great admirer of Luther, and his Holocaust could not have occurred without his influence and the support of Bible-believing German Christians. In the 1530s William Tyndale completed his version of the English Protestant Bible, probably with the aid of Luther, and the first to print the English Bible. He too felt the persecution of the Church and he spent his last days in imprisonment and exile. His enemies finally caught him and burned him at the stake, but because of his celebrity, they strangled him first. What nice guys. After Luther's German Bible, others followed suit by translating the Bible into their native languages including Dutch and French. Not until 1611 CE did a committee of translators and interpreters complete the most popular Bible of all time, the King James Version. Today we still have dozens of Bible translation versions, with Bible scholars still arguing over the meaning and proper translations of words and phrases. The following shows just a few of the most popular versions. King James Version KJV. The New King James Version in KJV. Modern King James Version left square bracket Green's translation right square bracket MKJV. Literal Translation Version left square bracket Green right square bracket Liv. International Standard Version ISV. The New International Version NIV. English Standard Version SV. New English Bible NEB. American Standard Version ASV. New American Standard Bible NASB. Revised Standard Version RSV. New Revised Standard Version in RSV. Contemporary English Version SEV. Today's English Version TEV. The Living Bible Pound. New Century Version NC. New Life Version NLV. New Living Translation NLT. Young's Literal Translation YULT. Revised Young's Literal Translation RYLT. John Darby's New Translation Weymouth New Testament Translation Reforms. One might wonder what will happen to the new revisions a few hundred years from now. Nevertheless, the King James Version still remains the most used Bible in the world today, and it will probably continue its popularity long into the future. No doubt that future versions of Bibles will surface in the future, revisions of previously revised Bibles and newer revisions of new versions. The history of the many versions of the Bible stories, from the ancient Mesopotamian myths to the varied interpretations, interpolations, and versions of the Bible, speaks volumes about the reliability of their interpretations and the alleged truth they claim the Bible holds, because it shows that the Bible comes not from supernatural agents but rather from human imagination. We have not one shred of evidence for the supernatural influence on human written works, and mostly from unknown authors, but we do have an abundance of evidence for human recorded beliefs and myths. This shows a marked difference between those of scientific works and those deriving from religious minds. For example, Euclid's Elements, written around 300 BC, has changed little since its inception. Scientists don't argue and debate about its meaning, because they know it doesn't represent an absolute or fixed work. It only provides a step in the understanding of geometry. Most Christian apologists, on the other hand, view the Bible as fixed and absolute, if only they could only just get the interpretation correct. But regardless of how much they want the Bible to reflect their particular beliefs, they can never dislodge the violence and atrocities described and condoned by their God in the stories in the Old Testament. Nor can they dismiss the even more horrific result of the horrors of hell, as amplified by the words of the alleged Jesus in the New Testament, where almost everyone on earth dies in eternal fire. In short, Bible belief influences horror, not by the majority but by the few that actually believe in its macabre prophecy and have the power to force their beliefs onto the majority. We have little reason to think that violence inspired by Bibles and other religious texts will ever cease. One only has to look at the religious wars around the world to see belief's everlasting destructive potential. One only has to look at the Protestant Catholic uprising in Ireland, the conflicts in the Middle East with Jews fighting Muslims and Christians, the Gulf War, Sudan's civil war between Christians and Islamics, the Bosnia conflicts, and the war in Iraq. The desperate acts of fanatical individuals who have killed for their beliefs of Jesus, Muhammad, God or Satan would create a death list unmatched by any other method in history. The Holy Bible supports the notion of war and destruction, not only as a prophecy but as a moral necessity. If we wish to become a peaceful species, it may well serve us to understand the forces of belief that keep us in continual conflict, and why the Bible has such a stronghold on the minds of people around the world.